بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Today, inshallah, for the first maybe 15 or hopefully no more than 20 minutes, I will talk a little bit more about some of the sins and some of the available solutions that we have. And for the rest of the time after that, inshallah, I have a list of questions that have been shared with us. Please feel free to share with us questions right now on the actual link. There's a place for comments on the video, on the live stream. And Brother Khalid will read them out to me, or I'll be able to access them throughout the halaqah episode, and I can answer them, inshallah. I had talked about I started talking about the four major sins of the heart, and unfortunately we only got through 3 of them, and we really did go through them quickly. I didn't realize, I guess, how much time they would actually require in terms of explanation and commentary. So I talked about vanity, ujub, and I talked about arrogance, kibr, and I talked about ostentation, riya. And today, inshallah, the final and the fourth sin of the heart is al-hasad, envy. And Islamically, al-hasad and al-ghibta are 2 different things. Al-ghibta is you wish you had something. You see something, you wish you had it. That's ghibta. Especially if it's a good thing. If you're wishing to have a good thing, then that's actually a good trait to have. Al-ghibta. When you see someone who's very knowledgeable and you wish you were knowledgeable, you see someone who's successful, you wish you're successful, that's ghibta, and that's fine. You try to focus it towards things that are beneficial for you in dunya and akhirah, and not to be superficial, so don't just hope to have things. It's not what we should be thinking about. But al-hasad is تمني زوال النعمة من الغير أو استثقال رؤية النعمة عند الآخرين. Hasad is hoping that people who have things lose them, or finding it difficult to accept or to be happy or to be content with others having more than you or achieving more than you. When I say having more than you, I'm using the actual phrase quite liberally, having not just materialistic assets, but having as in achieving and being successful and getting ahead in life. And this is probably, if you put in the word hasad and ayn in Google, especially in Arabic, you can just enjoy what we have been able to come up with as a society in terms of like the most, probably the topic that has the most voodoo and superstition surrounding it, unfortunately, is hasad and ayn. And we have really abused some of the teachings that we have in the Quran and the Sunnah regarding what these things are. Ayn and hasad are haqq. There's no doubt surrounding that. They exist, but they are unmeasurable. Something that you cannot measure, you cannot claim that you know how to heal or to fix or to treat. And you can never ever say that is what we're seeing right now is the effect of hasad or ayn, because there's no way for you, and there's no test. If you have a fever, there are objective ways for us to figure out why you have that fever. There are tests that we do. We take samples from your blood, and we figure out what's causing it. But if someone feels sick or feels unwell or things aren't going well for them in life, you can't say, well, that's because they have ayn and hasad upon them, because there's no way to objectively say that. So for us to walk down that path in terms of trying to figure out who's the one who affected them with ayn and hasad, how to go, is a complete waste of time and is fully superstitious. What we should be doing, and takes us back to even before Jahiliyyah. Like Jahiliyyah probably did better than us regarding how we deal with ayn and hasad today. Some of the practices are completely insane in what people do. Then how are we supposed to deal with ayn, and how are we supposed to deal with hasad? Well, the way the Prophet ﷺ taught us. You recite Quran, you do your adhkar, your invocations, you supplicate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You protect yourself by doing all these things, by reciting Quran. It's always good to recite Quran for someone if they're not feeling well. Regardless of whether it's ayn or hasad or not. Ruqya is something that we do as Muslims. Does that mean we don't go and to take the person to the emergency room or the doctor so they can be checked up and looked at? Of course not, we're going to do that too. Never accept someone saying that what's happening, this is hasad, that's why you... and I'll explain how it can be hasad in a moment, so you do understand that there is an effect of it that can be sometimes seen, but not the way that we're dealing with it. Someone looked at it and then that's why it didn't work out, or it didn't. There's no way for us to prove that. So there's no point of following up on that type of behavior. Another way to protect yourself from ayn and hasad is don't share the good stuff that you have, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon you in terms of blessings, except with people whom you know truly love you. Don't share it with everyone. If you go parade your success in front of everybody, obviously people are going to be envious and jealous. And that's what social media has actually caused us to. We're sharing everything with everybody. And we're not discriminating. And that's not healthy. Islamically, we're not supposed to do that. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you any blessing, whether you own something new or you achieve something great, not everybody should have access to that information. You choose the people who are going to know these things. My teacher used to tell me, share your successes with those who love you, and share your failures with those who really love you. Because these personal milestones that you go through during your life, it's not public information. And it can cause people, someone may not be envious, but you keep on pushing how well things are going for you. And sometimes, by the way, a lot of people, meaning they put stuff like that online, and it's not true. It's not truthful, meaning they're actually not doing too well, and they're suffering, they're struggling, but they want people to think that they are, which is even worse. You're actually, you're invoking hasad in people. You're provoking, hasad in people for something that's not even true. It's a complete mess, wallahi. If you want to get rid of hasad, then do your invocations, recite the Quran, perform ruqyah, make dua, and then don't share everything with everybody. I know people who do it on purpose, who purposefully will share with someone else because they want to show off and to see how well they're doing. And then they wonder why. Well, you're provoking hasad and ayn, and that's your fault. But there's no way to measure hasad and ayn. So all the recipes that they give you and it's all made up. There's no evidence for it in the Kitab and Sunnah. And I'll end with that because this is an hour and a half lecture that I give. But let's talk about how hasad can be effective. I'll tell you how. And this is I want you to listen to the story. A person got engaged to someone, and they told their friend. And then a few weeks later, the engagement broke off. So the mother will say, it's hasad, your friend must have performed hasad. Now she's thinking in a mystic manner, meaning he looked at something and he ruined it. But no, his hasad actually ruined his friend's engagement, but not the way you think. He ruined it because he's always been envious of him. He's always been jealous of his friend. And when he heard that he's getting engaged, getting married, things are working out for him, that bothered him. So when the father of the bride, or the bride-to-be, asked him, because he's a friend of him, about his friend, he told him, no, he's not a good guy. And the father said, okay, you're not marrying this person. And he ended it. So hasad did end it. Hasad was the reason that this person lost his engagement, but not the way you think. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا hasad is not just some energy wave that is leaving the eyes of this. It's more than that. People who are envious of you will harm you. If you are envious of people, then you're likely to harm them, or you're likely to withhold benefit from them when you're given the chance to actually help them, which is the problem of hasad. Where does hasad come from? Hasad is one of the instincts of the nafs, one of the reflexes of the nafs. It comes from its basic instinct of wanting to be on top, wanting to be the strongest, wanting to be the most powerful amongst people so it can survive longer. So because that's what it believes, and I talked about this I think in one of the episodes, it starts to see other people's success as something negative. Because if someone else is succeeding, that they're getting ahead, that means you're not ahead, that means you're not going to survive the most, that's a negative thing. So it stems from that problem that the nafs has. It wants to be the best. It can't accept others being the best. And it turns later on into hasad. It turns into envy, where you don't want people to succeed. And when you're told Fulan, he just graduated, or Fulan, was able to start a new job, or they're becoming more influential, or they're getting leadership positions, you feel your heart closing up and your nafs, you feel bad. That's why. It's because you're jealous, because you're envious. And then you have to deal with that. You have to figure out, why is it that I feel that way? There's a few things that you can do. Number one, you have to remember that other people's success is not your failure. Other people succeeding doesn't mean that you're failing. There's no correlation here whatsoever. other people succeed. They are doing the best with what they've got. And they started at one point and they're moving towards another one. You are unaware of all of the details of where they were, where they're going, how they got there. You don't know anything. So there's no point of you feeling negative about it because it's something that is very unknown to you. There's too many details you don't know. And where you are in comparison to them, there's no way to compare because there's too many variables that doesn't allow a proper, acceptable, valid comparison. People's success does not mean that you're not succeeding. You're just going to arrive where you're going at a different time. We have different stories. Everyone has a storyline. We're all, living our stories out. Everyone has a different story. Everyone reaches milestones at different times. We all achieve different things in different ways. No two stories are identical. That's impossible. No matter who it is, even identical twins don't have identical life storylines. We live different lives. So when you see someone that was succeeding, that shouldn't make you feel bad about yourself. Because as long as you're walking down your path, the only reason you should feel bad if other people are succeeding is if you're not doing anything. And that's really not a problem of others, not really hasad. It's more something different. It's lack of self-esteem and it's lack of himmah, or lack of ambition, which we'll talk about in a moment. It's a different thing. Second point you need to think about is عطاء غير محدود. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his blessings are limitless. Sometimes the nafs uses that basic instinct of there's only so much that can be distributed. So if this person's taking a lot of it, then there may not be enough for me left. It's just, we go back to the same French fry plate thing. If there's a lot of people around the plate, then you start thinking, am I going to get enough? Is it going to be enough for me? And you start thinking about that, because the nafs wants to make sure, wants to ensure that it gets its portion. So the nafs sometimes look at the dunya. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving people a lot, and this person is getting ahead and this person is successful, it starts thinking, is there enough of all that for me? Or am I going to be left out? And the Quran says, قُلْ لَوْ أَنْتُمْ تَمْلِكُونَ خَزَائِنَ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّي إِذَا لَأَمْسَكْتُمْ خَشْيَةَ الْإِنفَاقِ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ قَتُورًا. See, if the human being had the khaza'in, the safes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where all the rahmah, all the compassion, and all the blessings exist, if he had all of that, if the human being had that in his hands, then the human being, even though it's a limitless amount of blessing and compassion, would withhold it in fear of it ending or finishing, or there not being enough. It's just insan qatura. The human being is just like that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings are limitless. They're endless. So if someone's getting a lot, doesn't mean that there's not enough for you. There's enough for you. You're going to get. But these are just little beliefs and convictions that the nafs has that you have to work on changing. How do we change convictions? We talked about that. Dhikr, dua, contemplation, reading. You have to continue to reinforce thoughts and reinforce ideas and reinforce topics through the invocation of Allah, through supplication, and through contemplation. These are three things you do and allow you to reinforce thoughts so that you replace one thought with another. You replace the thought that there's not enough and people getting ahead is negative with something different. With the fact that everyone is walking down their path, and I should be happy for people who are successful. And I'll tell you how to do that in a moment, or what we can do to better achieve that. The third one, and the third thing that we should think about, is that we are not asked to be ahead of others. We're not being asked in our life to beat others, to be first. We're asked to do the best we have with what we've been given. That's what we're asked to do. The concept, and I'll talk about competition inshallah later, so there was a few questions about that too. Competition is a good thing, but its only function is to encourage you to do more, to test your limits, to push yourself to your limits. That's the point of it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not requiring you to be better than people or to get ahead of people. As we talked about when we talked about arrogance, that's not what you're required to do. What you're required to do is to use the tools that you were given to reach your potential, to be the best you can be with what you have. We all were dealt different hands. You can't judge people. You can't judge yourself on whether this person is more successful than me or I'm less successful than them based on the fact that we went to school together or we grew up in the same city or we're from the same family. All that is irrelevant. Just look at what you have and use it to the best of your ability. Just utilize all the potential that you have. And that's all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you, your best. وَلَا نُكَلِّفُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Only what you've got, only your ability, within the limitations of your abilities. Just do your best. And that is how you reach the highest ranks in akhirah, just by doing your best. The fact that others are ahead of you or made it farther than you doesn't mean that you're not doing well. Doesn't mean that you're not doing your best. Doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not satisfied with you. Hasad comes from that. Hasad comes from, sometimes some scholars look at, arrogance as one side and hasad as the other. And they're they affect each other. Because kibr is wanting to be better, and it leads, or believing that we're better, and it leads to us not wanting to see anything about someone else that is better than us, causing hasad. So hasad in one way is the result in certain aspects, is the result of kibr, of arrogance. Because if I'm trying to believe that I'm better than everyone, which I shouldn't, once I see that they've done something really important that I haven't done yet, it causes me to be upset, because now I can't justify that I'm better. I can't justify it anymore, so I become envious, and I hope that they lose it. And I wait for them to fall. I'm looking for their mistakes, I'm looking for their flaws, to see, maybe they're successful here, but I'm trying to find a flaw for them. To say, see, they did that, but they also do this. That's why they're not good. And that's how you... So how do you get rid of all this? Hasad, the solution is really not an invocation, as much as it is an Islamic concept. The concept of al-jama'ah. Al-jama'ah is one of the core Islamic fundamental principles, that the ummah is one, and that we work as a jama'ah, we pray in jama'ah, we do everything together. Why? We're trying to identify that we all wear the same jersey, we're on the same team. If you're a team player, you don't mind having a really good player on your team, because you want the team to win. But if you're on a team and you're an individualist and you don't care about the team, then yeah, you'll be upset if there's someone stealing the spotlight from you. And you'll be envious of them. But if the goal is for the team to win, you want as many good players on your team as possible. It's just being able to see that people who are succeeding around us are on our team, especially if they're Muslim. And if they're not Muslim, they're on our team as in humanity, as the human team. The more people who are doing well, the better the human race is going to be. If we have a lot of people who are able to achieve a lot in science and in technology and in human sciences and law and human rights, then we're going to be better. And they're on our team. So it's a shift of mindset. Instead of seeing them as you're on the other team, like against you, working against you, you see them working with you, for you. They're on your team, they're on your side. And that requires a mindset shift. That's why jama'ah is so core in Islam. You have to do things in jama'ah. Closing masajid is a musibah, because it takes away a lot of the jama'ah, or whatever's left of it in our ummah. Because most aspects of jama'ah have been sucked out of the ummah slowly. All we're left with is the religious aspect of jama'ah, which is good. It helps. It keeps people feeling that they're one, that they're together, that they work together, that they're on each other's sides. We compete, and competition is just to encourage hard work, is to make us try. But we're competing, still hoping that everyone reaches the finish line, that everyone actually reaches before we do, as long as I reach as well. As long as, inshallah, I make it too, and I put in my effort. And we help one another along the way. So it's a different type of competing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages in the deen. So to get rid of hasad, you have to change the way you see. It's a perspective shift. You have to start seeing things differently. People around me aren't working against me, they're working with me. They're part of the same team. And that allows you to actually enjoy people's successes and share them and not feel envious. As long as you feel that you're doing your best, you're trying the hardest you can, and you're making progress, then welcome. May everyone, inshallah, make progress and move forward. And the more good people we have, the more likely it is we're going to succeed as an ummah. Meaning the priority has to be the success of the ummah. That's what we have to want. We want this ummah to succeed, because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Not just for me to succeed and everyone else to fail. If I'm the only person succeeding, everyone else is failing, that means things aren't working. That means everything isn't working, and things have to be fixed. We want everyone to succeed so that the ummah succeeds. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded. So it's understanding what Allah wants, putting the priority of the group instead of before ourselves, and then understanding that we're on the same team. These are just concepts that we need to learn in order for us, inshallah, to get rid of hasad. A few dishonorable mentions of diseases of the heart that are important. Selfishness, shuh, stinginess, al-bukhl. Shuh or selfishness is the ultimate expression of the human soul. The human soul is extremely selfish. That's how it expresses itself. It wants everything for itself. And we talked about that, what it wants. It wants to live longer, and it wants to It wants to survive, and it wants to find immediate pleasure. So it's very selfish. It doesn't care about others. That shuh can be directed in different directions. It can be here in dunya, which turns a person into a very difficult individual to live with, or it can be directed towards al-akhirah. Be very, very selfish about achieving and arriving at Jannah. Be very selfish about that. And if you're very selfish about that you want to make it to Jannah, you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded you to be very selfless in dunya. And that's how you actually, use the nafs selfishness, because you never get rid of it and you need it. Without it, you can't survive as a human being. You need that instinct. You're just going to redirect it from dunya to akhirah. That requires learning more and turning ideas into principles that you live by. That idea of akhirah has to sink in. You have to continue to learn that and think about it. And other mentions is shahwa, lust. Lust is a problem that it should take at least 2 episodes, to be honest, on its own. Just talking about lust, specifically for men. Not that women don't suffer with this, they do. And some men think that they don't, they do. It's just the intensity is a bit different and the frequency is a little bit different. Actually, every person struggles with these 4 or 25 sins of the heart differently. Because we have different structural, psychological structures, and we're raised differently, we have different backgrounds. So we struggle with different things differently. Some people have kibr as their most difficult. Some people have hasad. Some people it's riya, that's the most difficult thing. Some people it's lust. It depends on just who you are. But the intensity of lust for men is extremely difficult and very important to tackle, because it stems from a human instinct of wanting to spread your seed and have as many children as possible, so that you're stronger, so that you have more protection, so you survive and your legacy continues. That's how the nafs looks at it. So it's an instinct, a very strong instinct. It's always difficult to change instincts. Actually, it's impossible to change an instinct, but there are certain things you can do to control it and to limit it, so that you're not falling into haram, falling into fawahish. And again, I think we're coming to the 20-minute point, so I'm going to end with these things. I hope what we talked about, inshallah, was beneficial, and that you found some answers in the halaqah, in the episodes that I offered. I believe that this is not by any means enough for someone to actually make true change. I just tried to open the door and kind of point where the path is, so that we start walking down, asking questions, and wondering, and trying to figure out ourselves, and trying to figure out what we need to do to change ourselves. And that has to be one of our main priorities as a Muslim society and as Muslim individuals, which is the goal of having this series. I did get a number of questions. One of the questions was about references. I will struggle with that a little bit. What I'm putting together is the accumulation of years of study and of spending time with people who have this knowledge. But to point out a few things, some good books. Well, the main core reference for this in Arabic is the Imam Ghazali's known study Ihya Ulumuddin, the resurrection of the sciences of the religion. But it's a very comprehensive one, and it's difficult, and you can't study it on your own. Or you can read it, but you will find it difficult to understand, because you do need scholars and teachers to explain what he's trying to say, rahmatullah alayh. There's an easier one, it's in Arabic, and I think it's translated to English, but I'm not sure exactly who translated it. There's Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin al-Maqdisi, which is in Arabic an easier text that you can study. There's Risala al-Qushayriyya for Imam al-Qushayri is a book that talks a lot about spirituality as well. Fann al-Dhikr wa Du'a is a more modern one for Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, where he talks about the art of invocation and supplication, and he goes down the road of talking about stuff like this. The Hikam al-Ata'iyya, the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah al-Sakandari are a very good number. There are pieces of wisdom that were explained by multiple scholars throughout the centuries that are very deep and profound, and they talk a lot about the nafs, and there's a lot to learn from there. In English, I know there are some books that I've looked at or I've been introduced to is Purification of the Heart by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, which is a good, which is a good approach. He has a good approach there. You can benefit from the concepts of purification. Sister Yasmin Mujahid wrote a book, Reclaim Your Heart, that also has a number of points and topics that you'll find beneficial. In general, there's a lot of material that talk about these things out there. There's really no limitation, just limits on who you should read for and who you shouldn't. This is something we all have in common. One of the questions I got was, do I listen to, I want to learn from someone that talks about these things, but they have bad political opinions. You're not learning their political opinions. You're learning something about the nafs, that's fine. please don't, treat Muslim speakers or speakers in general in the world as in take all or leave all. That's a very bad way to approach life in general. That's not how we do things. You take what is beneficial, leave what's not. If this person has really bad political opinions, leave them. Don't learn them from them. But if they have a lot of insight on the human soul, well, listen to that. Even if they're not practicing it, but if they have knowledge to offer you, then listen to it, learn what you can, take the positive from every experience. And we've been like that as Muslims, unfortunately, over the last number of centuries. We either take all or leave all with scholars, and it's caused a lot of problems. If a scholar makes a mistake, we end up, trashing everything that they've done for 60, 70 years, and there's a lot of benefit in the work that they put forward, but we're not mature enough to be able to, to kind of differentiate. And remember that they're human beings. They'll do things right and they'll do things wrong. I mean, just when you're more famous and you're looked up to, your mistakes tend to, the echo of your mistakes tend to be a bit louder, and people get to see them. Alhamdulillah, our mistakes are concealed and people don't see them because no one cares. But once you're a bit more famous, your mistakes become more obvious. So I would definitely advise listening to whoever is talking about these things and learning from them as much as you possibly can. I'm going to go through some of the questions I have in front of me, and then I'll allow Brother Khalid to share with me some of the questions that you guys have put. Are there any questions that are live? Okay. So I'll try to go through a few of them. I was asked about competition. Competition is fine in Islam. Athletic competition is not what I was talking about. When you're playing a sport, you're supposed to compete. Thinking that you're better than people is not in a specific domain. Well, I'm a better chess player, I'm a better soccer player. It's thinking you're better in general, which is the problem. That's what kibr is. Thinking you're better in general. I'm better than them in just as a whole, as a human being. That's the problem. If I'm better in a certain thing and I'm competing with them at it, that's fine. Humbleness would also require you to acknowledge that people are good. And that sometimes there's a lot of luck in winning competitions. People who are professional athletes know that, and smart professional athletes will always acknowledge the other players who are doing just as well, probably better than them, but they got lucky and they were fortunate to win. And that comes from also a good understanding of how the world actually works. What about kibr towards non-Muslims? Was the question. The worst thing you can do is to use Islam as a mean for arrogance. That's the worst thing you can do with the deen. I mean, you're given the biggest blessing in the world. You're given Islam. The worst thing to do with it is use it as a means to be arrogant, to look down on people. You don't know how the person in front of you is going to end their lives, do you? You don't. So the person in front of you is a non-Muslim. You can't be arrogant because you don't know how his life is going to end. You don't know how your life is going to end. Very easily, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change things around. That person's life can end with La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and you can end somewhere else. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us husn al-khitam. Because we don't know how things are going to end, we have no rights to look at people and say we're better. And again, we still don't know what their stories are, what their storyline is like. We don't know why they are what they are. We don't even know if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold them accountable for the mistakes that they made. We don't know anything. So even if they're non-Muslim, we don't have the right to look down or to be arrogant. We still offer the message. We still warn from punishment and give the good news of Jannah and try to teach people Islam and tell them this is the only faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to accept. But then what he does Yawm al-Qiyamah with people is completely his business, is not mine. So I have no reason. I can't say, well, Ya Rabbi, you said you're going to put these. It's not my business what he does. He's not questioned subhanahu wa ta'ala what he's going to do with people. So you cannot be arrogant towards non-Muslims ever. I was asked a question about how to convince the nafs of the long-term plan rather than the short-term. This just happens through reinforcement. A lot of dhikr, a lot of dua, and a lot of contemplation regarding that, and listening to durus and listening to lessons that talk about it will reinforce that topic in your mind. It'll sink in. It'll become a part of your nafs. It takes time. That's why these lessons take time. That's why you're going to have to force it for a while. And then it'll kind of be silent for a while. And then it'll finally change. It takes time. These still take years. This takes years to happen. But we're going to be here for years, so might as well do it. Because if you're here in 10 years and you didn't do anything, well, you just wasted 10 years of your life. But it is a process, and there's no one thing that you need to do. Just use all the rules and all the tools that we talked about, and you'll see that slowly the nafs will start turning around. I was asked about dua and sujood dua. Does it have to be in Arabic? No, it can be in any language you want. And there is different opinion regarding the fard for that fatwa, but I'm still comfortable with it being in any language, even in a fard. Especially if you're not comfortable saying it in Arabic. I was asked about CBT a few times, which is cognitive behavior therapy. And is that, yes, and that is very much an application of what I talked about in terms of thoughts and behaviors and feelings. And I don't claim that I came up with thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. People have been talking about this for a millennium. I just put it together in a certain way that is mine. But that's how I look at it. But no, of course, CBT is an extremely powerful tool that therapists will use to help people change. And you're very encouraged to learn more about that. And if the therapist is asking you to engage in it, to definitely engage in it. Again, I didn't really offer anything that is exclusively mine in this series. I just gave it a name. I just gave the cycle a name just so it's easier just to have some nomenclature that is common between us when we're talking about something. But no, CBT is a very powerful tool, and you're definitely encouraged to follow it. And it's very similar to what you talked about. What about youth and teenagers? If you have someone 11 or 12 years old, how do I introduce these things? You introduce these things the way I introduced them to you. You start talking about them. You start explaining things like inside you have a nafs. It's that part of you that is, that wants to do this. It's actually, especially when your kids make mistakes, it's better to actually talk to them about why they made that mistake and where the urge came from, where the tendency came from. So they start understanding themselves. You want to start with just basic understanding and observation, the ability to acknowledge, oh yeah, I felt that, and that feeling comes from my nafs, and I shouldn't always listen to it. I should be able to, I need to resist it and do the right thing. So you start as early as the kids can understand this stuff. And then you start working with them. There's a lot of, inshallah, if we extend this series after Ramadan or we find time for it, I'll focus on that a little bit more. But it is something that kids should start learning at an early age, if possible. I was asked about riya and whether, wanting people's attention, and, there's an underlying problem for it. In certain situations, it is. Riya is just a manifestation of an underlying problem of seeking attention because of, deficits in the spirit, or psychological deficits. In that case, you need to actually see therapists to help you out, because figuring out why that is, what happened in your childhood and what's happening now, that makes you need to cling on and hold on to people and not be able to live without people's attention. Riya is different. Riya is less intense than that. Riya is just wanting people to continuously see you and acknowledge you and praise you, and you're not doing things for the right reason. You're not doing them selfless. You want, there is secondary gain, which is people's attention. But if it turns into the point where you can't live without it, that's more intense, and that needs professional help to actually approach it. I was asked about nifaq and why it wasn't talked about. Nifaq is basically if you put all these problems together in a person's heart and they're all functioning really well for these problems, that's what nifaq is. Nifaq is the outcome of having all these problems. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about munafiqeen, says, فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ. In their hearts there's a disease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points it out like that. So it's not its own disease, nifaq. Nifaq is the sum of all these diseases. That's why getting rid of these diseases is how you get rid of nifaq in general. And those are the questions I got. The last question I had was, am I available to be a mentor? I'm not the right person for doing that. I understand where the question is coming from, but definitely you need to look for someone who has more experience in life, who is a bit more older, who's done more, and who has actual, proper, I guess, backgrounds regarding these things. You don't want to look for someone like me in their 20s or 30s or 40s. You want someone who's a bit more experienced in life to help you with this. But as a group, we can start putting together an effort to help one another, to work together on purifying the nafs and learning, a lot of these aspects. But there's really no, sign up here. You can sign up to be mentored, but that's not how this works, really. But we will figure out, inshallah, a way to help everyone on their journey of self-purification. Those are the questions that I have. You can go ahead and share whatever questions you have. Sure, if whatever I've addressed, you can just skip, and you can give me whatever.
Tell them also to
Sure.
To the recording.
Sure.
How is laziness treated, and is it a disease itself?
Yeah. So kasal would if this. Yeah. So the question was, is laziness a disease, and how do you deal with it? Laziness is one of the diseases. Had this series been longer, then ghafla wal kasal would have been one of the things I would talk about. Kasal, laziness, is definitely one of the diseases. It stems from the nafs, from the soul's instinct or reflex, not to want to spend energy if it's not getting immediate gratification. If it's not going to find joy immediately, it doesn't want to spend any energy at all. If there's no selfish interest in it for the nafs, it doesn't want to spend any time. So that ends up becoming laziness. How you fix it is that you have to become someone who's ambitious. People who have ambition, people who have, great hopes for the future, people who are high functioning, who want to do something with their life, aren't lazy. Those who struggle, and it kills me when I see youth who are lazy, who don't have hopes, who have ambitions that are very simple, that are very, that don't have any soul or spirit in it. There's no love in it. They just want a simple job, enough money to have an apartment, and just to enjoy their life with their friends. That's not how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be ambitious. You're supposed to want to change the world. You should have goals of trying to make the world a better place and work for the ummah. That ambition comes from listening to people who were successful and spending time with people who are ambitious. You need to go and find people who are ambitious, surround yourself with them, and they will strengthen your himmah, strengthen that urge to be better. It's okay to at the beginning to allow the nafs to enjoy its self-interest and ambition at the beginning, and then you can change the intention later on. Because you want to use the instincts that you have for khayr. Like if you have the nafs wants to get ahead, right? It wants to be the strongest. But it has to be able to see that what you're doing is going to take it there in order for it to get really excited about it. If not, it'll just sit back. Studying will get you somewhere, but it's too long term for the nafs to see, so it's too lazy to get up and do it. It doesn't want to do it. But if you're able to convince the nafs that doing these things will give us strength, will give us status, will get us ahead, then the nafs is going to want to do it. And you can use that that instinct within the nafs to get yourself motivated to do things, and then you can work on perfecting the intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's fine. But laziness comes from lack of ambition, and just lack of motivation. And that, to change that, you have to surround yourself with the right people. You have to listen to the stories of the people who were great and what they did in their lives, and encourage yourself. And it's a big topic, but I hope that those are some gems that you'll benefit from.
How would you advise one proceed with the subject of pre-adolescent children? Can they process deep concepts like nafs, hawa, etc.?
Yeah, so I think I talked about it a little bit, but so the question is, how do you approach pre-adolescent children regarding issues of nafs and hawa and spirit and all that? As I said, you know your children. Will they understand these things? If they won't, we'll give it some time. Once you feel that they have the ability to comprehend these concepts, start explaining it to them, just so that they learn to observe. So they learn that when you felt that way, when you broke your sister's toy, why did you do it? We get preoccupied with yelling at them that they shouldn't have done it. When the question should be, okay, why did you do that? They don't know, and then you explain why. Well, maybe you were envious, maybe you were jealous, maybe you felt that they were getting more attention. And kids actually will surprise you with how much insight they have if you open the door of this conversation existing. And then you can talk about this. This comes from the nafs, comes from the soul. That's where it stems from. I shared just a couple of these things with my son. He's 9. And I found him to be much more receptive to them than I thought he would be. So I think at age 8, 9, 10, I was presented with these things at a young age. The concept of the nafs and the fact that it urges you to do some things that aren't good, and why, and that I should acknowledge that, and I should be aware of that. So you can start introducing these concepts slowly, but it has to be as gradual and slow and rifq. Remember the rules we talked about. It has to be tender and kind, how you're going to present these things and how you get people to slowly see. You're not going to see change within a week or two, or a month or two. This takes years. So if you're going to be your child's spiritual mentor, you have to have a lot of patience, and you have to be very, very calm. And if you can't, then you should leave it for someone else, or you should get other people in the family involved, or people of knowledge or wisdom who are involved who can help you out. And you'll always find people like that in your families. And a lot of what I'm saying in this series is common knowledge for people who are over 65 or over 60. People who've lived life. They know what I'm talking about. They don't need to hear this. They know. And that's why you'll find that grandparents are much more easygoing with children. They weren't like that with you when you were a kid. And you start to wonder, what happened? Did you go soft? No, they just realized a lot of stuff. They just came to a lot of realizations that what we used to do wasn't the right way to go by it. And there's other ways to actually help children develop and learn about themselves. So I hope that kind of answers. But we will work on that. We will, inshallah, a spin-off of this series to work on something that's more focused towards that age group, inshallah ta'ala.
Does an-nafs al-lawwama imply a guilting or shaming tone that we need to adopt? How do we maintain balance between holding ourselves accountable while moving forward in a constructive manner?
Yeah. So the question was about shame and guilt, and whether nafs al-lawwama is about shame and guilt, and do we need to adopt that or not, and how do we move forward? there's been this really powerful movement in the world today to get rid of shame and guilt completely. To remove it, even as the political correctness has moved towards removing it as something that should never exist in the wordings within schools and homes. And I agree to a certain extent that shame is not a Islamic tool. Guilt and shame are natural responses of the nafs. Religion didn't produce them, didn't create them. The nafs has them. The nafs, the soul, the human being, when he lives within a society that has certain standards and he goes against those standards, and the society looks at that person as in why you did that, you end up having shame. It doesn't necessarily need to be religion. You don't even have to have a set number of ethics and values. It's just there. It's when we use shame as the only or as the main motive to change people or to get people to behave where we abuse it and where we actually harm individuals. The nafs al-lawama is just another word for the conscience in the Quran. It blames you in the form of saying that, reminding you that you shouldn't have done that. And a certain amount of that guilt is healthy, is important. Without it, if someone doesn't feel guilt at all when they make a mistake, it's a problem. If you have a child that makes a mistake and feels nothing and is totally fine with it, that's actually something that needs to be addressed quite quickly, because you're supposed to feel bad about when you do make a mistake or do something wrong or harm someone. And that is a small amount of guilt. It should be there. But it's when we motivate people with nothing but guilt and nothing but shame, and they become where it becomes a problem. But the conscience is there to regulate our behavior by making us feel good when we do something good, and making us feel bad when we do something negative. And that's just how we function as human beings. I've heard theories trying to completely get rid of that as a motive. But it's unnatural and it's unnecessary. I don't think I've not seen it work before. So no, we shouldn't be motivating ourselves with shame and guilt only. We shouldn't be doing that for our children. But having a certain amount of it is a healthy thing. It allows us to function. You have it anyways. When you don't get up for your prayer immediately, you feel guilty, you feel bad. Because your nafs says you have a good nafs, you have a good conscience that's saying you should have done that earlier. Why are you waiting till now? Why didn't you get up? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? That's just normal. But it shouldn't be the only. And if it turns, it can become pathological, meaning certain psychiatric deficits and mental health issues can cause shame and guilt to get out of hand, which is something we need to watch out for. So if you're someone who struggles with that, then it's not really this series that's going to fix things for you. You need to speak to professionals. There are deficits within the soul, as I kind of pointed out in the first and second episode, that what I'm talking about, the purification process can be helpful for, but will not fix. It will not cure. It will not treat. Some deficits need to be dealt with professionally, and there are different approaches to it. And I have been in contact with people who have extreme degrees of guilt and shame all the time. And they think it's good because it's Islamic, but it isn't. That degree of it is not healthy, and it needs to be. And everything is in moderation in this life, as we know, is healthy and is natural. And when things go into extreme degrees, it was when it becomes problematic.
Does feeling entitled come from vanity, or is it a little bit different?
No, it's actually, so feeling entitled, does it come from vanity or is it different? Feeling entitled is one of the manifestations of vanity, with a little bit of kibr, meaning it's kind of both coming together and causing this feeling where I deserve more. Because deserving is not just deserving something, but it's deserving more than others. So other people are involved in entitlement a little bit. Entitlement is not purely just how we feel about ourselves. It also involves others. So it kind of comes from both vanity and arrogance existing inside of the heart, making us feel that somehow we deserve what we have, and even if people don't have it, we still deserve it. So somehow we are better, we are special. I should get, and it happens a lot in life when you see a long line and you want to get ahead because you don't feel like you're like everyone else. You feel like somehow you deserve to get there first. We all feel it, and many of us practice it, but that's where entitlement comes from. It just comes from the lack of gratitude and lack of acknowledgement that everything in life is a privilege. And again, that stems from vanity and arrogance, and if you deal with vanity and arrogance, it slowly goes away. But it also requires some realism. meaning people who are entitled are just unrealistic about the world. Usually, experience takes it away. I mean, the moment you go and you work in a place where people have nothing, you realize that you're not entitled to anything and that you're very privileged. So usually experiences will, kind of cure that. But yes, it does come from both arrogance and vanity kind of together.
Is there a book that collects stories of the righteous who share their experience with battling the nafs?
There are books. I would have to go look up titles today and try and put them. Yeah, maybe inshallah we can try to create a maybe either on the videos or even as like a little poster with some information, with some recommended books that can be read. I just have to figure out whether there are good translations for them. But there are a lot of Arabic books. There's a lot of books that talk about that. Just are the like Sifat al-Safwa, for example, for Ibn al-Jawzi. It's a very known book that just tells stories of the righteous and the pious, and from people who observed them and from their own. From their own words. And Siyar A'lam al-Nubala for Imam al-Dhahabi is a book like that as well. But I don't know to what extent these books have been worked on in English and translated. And some of these books have stories that are completely insane and should not ever be, circulated. So there's been work over the last number of years with taking these books and getting rid of some of the stories that don't make a lot of sense and that actually are harmful for people shouldn't be exposed to. But yeah, we'll work on that inshallah.
4 more questions, so inshallah we'll get through them all. How can you use the concepts we covered in Nafsahu to increase the khushu' we have in our prayer?
So what is khushu'? The question is, how do you use all the concepts that we talked about, spirit, soul, fu'ad, qalb, all that stuff to increase khushu'? So really what the question is, what is actually khushu'? Khushu' is when the nafs achieves that last stage. When the nafs actually enjoys prayer, when it turns into a nafs mutma'inna, when it stops doing something because it has to, or it stops doing something because it's too tired to fight, but it does it because it wants to do it. Once you achieve that, once you're making dua because you enjoy it, khushu' is so easy. Khushu' is not even something you have to work on. It just happens on its own. Actually, you'll be holding it back. You'll be trying not to turn into trying not to ruin what you're doing, where you can't even understand yourself. The release that occurs when you actually enjoy your salah, and enjoy your dua, enjoy your dhikr is natural. But you have to enjoy it. You cannot achieve khushu' when you don't like what you're doing. And it's a heaviness, and you feel like you're coerced, and this is not something that you like. So you have to move through the stages to achieve khushu'. And I talk about it every year, especially in tahajjud. And there are different examples that I can give you for it, inshallah. Inshallah, throughout tahajjud, we'll try. Maybe I'll do that tonight, inshallah. Throughout tahajjud, I'll talk a little bit about that. But khushu' is basically, it exists once you achieve that last stage. So you say, well, sometimes I have khushu', but I'm not on the last stage. You'll have moments of that stage. You see, we kind of move from, within being, following our nafs, coercing it being silent and enjoying. We move from one stage to the other, sometimes within an hour. Sometimes we do exactly what our nafs wants, and then we force it to do something good, and then it is now accustomed to do certain things, and then for a moment we actually enjoy what we're doing, and we have khushu', and then we go back again. So that movement is there, like we're always moving. What we're trying to do is to become consistent and to become permanent in a certain stage. Like we arrive at a stage of calmness and of love of what we do, of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just stay there and stop moving back and forth. But there's always going to be movement, by the way. Even the highest ranked people, close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they spend 99% of their time in calmness and itma'nan and closeness to Allah. But they will regress and back and forth. Right? The matter is, where do you spend the most time? Where does your nafs exist the most? So that's what khushu' is. Khushu' is just finding joy in what you do. Doing it because you love it, not because you have to.
This is similar to something was asked. When we fall short, do you recommend we maintain harshness with our nafs, i.e. use punishment, or would more of a self-compassion approach work?
So I talked about the rules. If you go back to the episode of the rules, I talked about being very tender and kind in dealing with your nafs. Harsh punishments don't work. If you fall short, you have to take some time to figure out why you fell short. What caused it? What is the element in your life that caused you not to be able to achieve your goal? The approach that I gave you was that when you feel your nafs resisting something, you increase the amount of, you're trying to silence it. But if you miss something, you don't do it at all, harsh punishments don't work. Making up for missed time is a good way to do it. A more compassionate self-approach is noted, but it's the question I'm being asked here is very generic, and there's no generic answer for it. Meaning, it really is case by case. It really is where you are, what you're doing, what type of person you are, how you respond to stuff like this. That's why having someone in your life to run these things by and finding a sheikh is important. And finding support and having people that you can discuss these struggles with is important, because there's really, and for me to give you, there's no one answer fits all, unfortunately, for that question specifically. So, it really is case by case, but the general rule is rifq, in graduality. That's the general rule. Harshness rarely works.
Aren't there more than 4 stages of purification? And if so, what are they?
The purification as in like the nafs, yeah. So the question is, are there more stages for the nafs? Yes, after the nafs al-mutma'inna, there's all these other, I talked about that as well, there's all these other higher stages that I don't know about, and I can't talk about, and I'm not qualified to even, imagine. This is for the extremely elite, and for those who are, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts His nur right directly into their hearts at all times, and they live with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every moment. I am talking about the stages that exist for most human beings, and I'm using myself as an example. You start with, submitting to your soul, then you coerce it to do the right thing, then it quiets down and accepts that what you're doing, and then it starts to love it. And it does it for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the nafs that the Quran talks about in mutma'inna. But are there higher stages? There are, Allahu A'lam, some scholars have gone up to 15 and 16 stages of trying to explain how the nafs kind of moves up forward. And there's different categorizations, and there's different ways to approach this topic. I chose to approach it this way. You'll find other people in different books approach it differently. It's fine. It all, at the end, serves the same purpose and has the same ideas. I mean, you're not going to find something that's contradicting. You won't find 2 approaches that are completely contradicting each other. You'll just find different ways of looking at things, that's all. But yes, there are much higher ranks, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you these ranks, inshallah, and grant all of us, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. But I just talked about the basics that most people will be in their lives.
Why is seeking pleasure an instinct of the soul? Is this exclusive to humans, as I thought it was just survival and reproduction?
Yeah. So, till this day, psychologists, sociologists, evolutionary biologists, and evolutionary psychologists aren't sure why it is, for example, why is it the soul plays? Why do we play? Why do we play? If you go look that up, you'll find 100 different answers, and scientists have tried to answer that question. Why is it that animals and human beings want to play? And it's almost and there's still a lack of clarity. So immediate gratification, immediate pleasure is one of the instincts that the soul carries, because it also it is attached to survival. Because the way the nafs looks at it is that the happier you are, and the more gratification you get, the more pleasure you get, the less stress you have, and the longer you live. So that's kind of how it fits into the concept of survival. But the other question is, since this came up, why is reproduction a part of human instinct? Because you don't really survive through reproduction. You're still going to die. So it's more about protection, and it's also about pleasure itself. So scientists are still trying to study and fully understand all the instincts of the human experience and of human behavior and why we do what we do. The answers aren't all there. There's a lot of theories. I didn't go into them because it's not going to be of benefit. But the 2 concepts that I explained to you are more than enough to know or to figure out why we do what we do and why we feel the way we feel. We want to survive, and we want to find immediate gratification or immediate pleasure. But yes, you're right. If you go and study, if you read papers, scientific papers on the matter, you'll find different opinions that don't all see eye to eye on what I said. But one way or another, we'll acknowledge that that is what the human being wants, with different explanations of why the human being wants it and where it comes from. And even animals want it as well. Animals want immediate gratification. That's why animals, if you give them, for those who take care of domesticated animals, know that if you give them too much food, they'll eat themselves to death, basically. You have to moderate how much food is available to them, because they just want to find that immediate gratification of eating. It's a part of their instincts. They don't know how to regulate themselves properly. And this is something that is observed in the animal kingdom as well.
That was the last question. My question to you is, would you be willing to do more of these series?
Inshallah. So, I think that's all the questions that we have. Brother Khalid's asking if we will continue to do this more often. Inshallah, after Ramadan, we'll figure out a plan of maybe how to continue to approach these topics, and maybe a weekly session or something like that. I think workshops are important when it comes to stuff like this. Meaning, it's not just the theory. There has to be some practice for it. I mean, there has to be examples of how this can be done, and then actually action plans for people to go out and do something, to learn more about themselves, and learn how to kind of regulate their emotions and feelings and behaviors, and purify the heart. So inshallah, after Ramadan, we'll take some time and contemplate and think about how we can expand this series, maybe repeat some of the topics and go into more depth with them, and maybe create a group of people who are interested in helping others get involved, and offering them some, because you do need support groups for this to work. I mean, without support groups and without mentorship, and without, it doesn't really go very far. On your own, you can only do so much. You can only start the journey. To complete the journey, you need more social involvement to get it done. So inshallah, that's what we'll do. I hope the series was beneficial. I hope that those who attended it found some khair in it. Whatever khair we found in it was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever mistakes I made, forgive me for them, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me for them as well. We make them all the time. Inshallah, kul aam wa antum bikhair, Ramadan Mubarak. This is the beginning of the last 10 nights of Ramadan, so it's a good time to really take a lot of what we talked about and start putting them into practice, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to aid you along your journey. Bidnillah ta'ala. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullahu khairan. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.